So thank you again for tuning in to today's webinar presented by Move United in partnership with Mind Body Solutions with support from the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs.
Hey everyone, I'm hoping you're there. It's kind of weird. I'm not being able to see any of you, so I'm waving to you and pretending we're actually in contact, because as a presenter, but also as a learner, dynamic matters too. So today I want to talk about balance and athletic performance. And I want to tell you a little bit about my story, but also the reason why I'm picking balance. We're going to focus on athletic performance and then choose balance as a way of helping some of the issues that I think a mind-body approach or yoga can really help in athletic performance. If you don't know about me, I'm 54 now. I was in a car accident when I was 13. My father and sister were killed. I'm paralyzed from the chest down, T4. I'm getting around in a wheelchair. Boy, I was 13, I'm 54, so 41 years. But I also broke my neck at C1 and both my wrists. Had a very traumatic injury, collapsed a lung, was unable to eat for nearly 60 days. I went from a very athletic 13-year-old boy to 79 pounds. I weighed 119 pounds to 79 pounds in less than 60 days. I woke out of a coma to a very changed life. So, you know, it's a traumatically acquired disability, very athletic. I remember wanting to start to pursue wheelchair athletics and stuff. But then unbelievably, a year after my accident, right after I finished therapy, I was really injured. I was in the hospital for 6 months and therapy for over a year, physical therapy. I fell out of my wheelchair and broke my neck. And I became a quadriplegic for a while, broke at C7. But that nerve damage wasn't permanent. But what it did do, and it happened because I had Harrington rods in my back, that they were so high up in my neck, I was vulnerable to another fall. And so that actually served to end. My doctor said, be careful about being too active in your wheelchair. Be careful about wheelchair athletics. At the time, I'd already started playing wheelchair basketball, which can be a pretty crazy, you know, flying out of your chair type thing. And so what happened to me at 13 was that I kind of just let that athleticism go. And I lived a vision of living with a disability. And this is part I want to talk about a little bit as an opening, is that I lived with the conception of rehabilitation and of recovery as, and I'm paralyzed from the chest down, as making my upper body really strong and learning to drag my paralyzed body through life. I could maintain it and I could live with below my point of injury for my mind having a relationship to my body, but as an object, that I could no longer live from inside to out through the paralyzed parts of my body because I had no sensation. And this vision of using my will to overcome my body, to learn to drag my paralyzed body through life, and just compensating for my disability actually had long-term effects. So after, you know, I went back to high school and I did well, and I went to college and went to graduate school, did all the things I was doing, but the whole time I kept being more and more unhappy with living in my body, with the quality of my experience within my body. And also the athlete in me also felt a lot of grief. Like I kind of felt I was sentenced to live more in my head and not in my body between the original injury and breaking my neck. And that vision of overcoming my body, not living in my body as much from inside to out, not taking time to work on living in my whole body, regardless of the level of sensation that I had, treating my body as an object. And by the way, these things aren't just things that happen as people with spinal cord injuries. And they're not just things that happen with any type of disability, that everybody treats their body as an object. But imagine or try to intuit, if you're not living with a disability, what it's like to constantly be frustrated with what your body is and isn't doing. But in fact, everyone's got that issue. And so what happened to me is that for 12 years, I really just did what I absorbed as the vision for rehabilitation and how I would live with a disability. And at 25, I was in graduate school studying philosophy and the mind-body problem. right? Didn't know I was thinking about myself. I thought I was just studying academics, right? But I just so missed my body, and my athleticism didn't have enough of an expression. And what happened to me, and it was a pivotal healing realization, was being able to figure out how to bring my athlete, my 13-year-old athlete, my athletic prowess into something like yoga, right? And over time, I really think there's a lot of similarities to it. And there are a lot of things that you can learn in a yoga practice that can very much help athletic performance. Um, in order to try to explain what I mean, I have to take a second to kind of back up a little bit. If you think about athletic performance or being an athlete or whatever it is, working your body, there's like three different basic components. I'm oversimplifying, actually, obviously. There's with sports and stuff and competition, there's the competition part. But this is a competition and wanting to exceed and drive, very important. It's a way to really activate your will. It gives you a reason to practice, which is crucial in being an athlete, because good habits are what make great athletes. It's not just athleticism, but the competition, the loving the win, hating the lose, all those things, that's part of being an athlete for sure. But then there's just athleticism, kind of your God-given abilities. I was blessed with really good hand-eye coordination and pretty good body awareness. And so that's also part of being an athlete. But the other side of this, which I think is really important, is the athletic performance part of being an athlete, and what that entails. And so I want to talk some about that today. But what I ended up figuring out, starting at 25, as I started to practice yoga, obviously yoga, or at least it shouldn't be done this way, doesn't have the competitive component, right? But what I started to realize, and why it was a healing thing for me, right, and even healing the athlete within me, was that I started to realize that I was a good athlete, not just because I was a good athlete, but I was a good athlete because I had a gifted mind-body relationship. And that was at the core of being an athlete, and why I was so drawn to sports in general, and into competition. And that ability, that gifted mind-body relationship, is something that very much applies to being an athlete. If you think about it, that being, especially if you're in team sports, with only some of you are, but like there's so much more. There's a gifted mind-body relationship. There's the skills you have, but there's also like the awareness of what's happening around you. There's the awareness of your form, of like, for me, let's just use the obvious example of shooting a free throw, right? That what happens when you actually are really good at shooting free throws in basketball, for example, is that there's a body sensation that is synonymous with, if you do it like that, the ball goes in the bucket, right? When you're in, this applies to whether you're swimming or running or biking, is that when your form is straight on, right, and really efficient, the sensations of success become habit, right? And all of that has to do with mind-body awareness. It's not just with your physical skills. The other thing is, if you're on a team and playing in a group, being able to play with and in sync with teammates is also a mind-body skill. It's an awareness skill. It's feeling part of something. All of these things, and like working toward a common goal. All these things have to do with being a high performance athlete, or an athlete at all. And so there's a mind-body component. When I started to realize it in yoga, so many of the things that I could work on in yoga enhanced my ability and utilized the athlete in me, not the competitor as much, right? But started to really access the awareness from inside out that is required to be a very effective athlete. And then, of course, something like yoga is going to help some of the wear and tear on your body, right? So, and especially because a successful athlete is going to have to push the limits, right? But one of the things I like to say to athletes is that if you're going to drive your body and work your body really hard, you also have to take the sensation of relief and the sensation of recovery very seriously, right? Because you're working so hard in other places in your life. And what ends up happening is that if you're an athlete that's only driving your will to drive your body, that you're constantly trying to push the limits from mind to body, that your tendency to be injured and break down increase. And what I want to do often to a high performance athlete is to say, hey, you're willing to work out really hard, but you are not as serious about relief. And you have to start taking that seriously if you're truly going to maximize your potential as an athlete. And so paradoxically, becoming a successful athlete requires not just the will and aspiration to succeed and win, but it also that aspiration requires a more inward aspect of some of your practices in order to maximize your ability to compete over time. And so all these things I started finding more and more relevant. The athlete in me that was willing to work really hard became crucial. But I also had to change my definition of what was working hard. Hence my comments about relief. What's working, the things I needed to work on, the things I need to slow down and take time with. These are all the type of skills that a yoga practice or some sort of mind-body practice starts to teach an athlete, right? So I think a mind-body practice going forward, especially if you're doing repetitive movements, is going to be crucial, right? So one of the reasons why I wanted to talk about balance too is that, well, let me back up for a second before I go to balance. Is that the other side of this is that in order to have successful athletic performance, to oversimplify, I think you need to learn to have a calm mind and an active body simultaneously, right? And because when you get too amped up and your mind gets not calm, you're going to start making mistakes. You're going to lose your form. You're going to lose a whole bunch of things. And so this idea of a calm mind, active body is exactly the skills you're practicing in something like yoga, right? One of the things that I find the hardest about teaching athletes, in particular adaptive athletes, is that they're so wanting to push the limits that they're not as willing or able to practice the calming side that is required for maximum performance. Now, there's a lot of different ways to work on the calming side, right? Obviously, meditation, different types of breathing, all sorts of stuff to be able to, let's say you're in something and you had a bad run, let's say you have a bad ski run and you got to put it behind you. The ability to create the sensation of grounding, of letting go in your body, being able to let your mental content actually wash away, quote, put a bad performance back in the past. But my point is being able to do that, being able to be in the present, are all things that are being learned in yoga, right? And so there's this really important application of being able to keep the mind focused in the present and letting go of your worries about your next play or your next race, or also something that didn't go as well in the past. So all these skills, and obviously things like meditation are going to help, but I want to spend today thinking a little bit more about things that are calming your mind while your body's being active. And that's part of why I practice asana, right? I practice yoga poses because the athlete in me, the part of me that craves physicality, right? That gets satiated more in asana than in meditation for me, right? But also my ability to integrate, my intelligence. The other thing about, unless you're incredibly physically gifted, like at a level way above everyone else, almost any high performance athlete will tell you that the game's incredibly mental, right? That like that's where some of your form and your inward ability to stay calm actually can make up for some of your athleticism that may not be as high as the person you're competing with, right? And so that's one of the level changes, is if you can bring intelligence into your athletic performance without creating doubt, without slowing down your reflexes, right? That's a really important skill, right? And so the idea of being able to be aware without slowing down your physical body is actually another skill that yoga really helps. The other thing that any athlete will tell you, and any yoga practitioner will tell you, right, is that it requires practice. It requires practice. That you need to form habits in your body, not just physical habits, but your mind's ability to stay present while the body's physically active. Those things take practice, right? And then one final piece that I really think that yoga can help you with is the ability to be coachable, right? That to really not feel like that you can take input in, but have your own process that allows you to integrate it. So it's not like you're just giving up power to the coach, but you're getting input and help coming into you, and that you can go and practice and work on and still make it your own. That's exactly similar, or not exactly, but it's very similar to going to a yoga class to get instruction and then having the discipline in order to practice it at home. And this is something that any athlete is going to need to be able to do, right? So for all these reasons, for some reason, in such a wonderful way, when I started practicing yoga, part of me started to heal, because I started to feel my athlete again, but my athlete that didn't just have to thrive on the adrenaline of competition. And so, not that I love competition, right? I still love all that. But my long-term health and my body over time requires that I both drive my body hard, but also listen to my body more. So obviously meditation is going to help with the inward calm for sure, right? But I want to focus on balance for a second. Now, there's a reason why I want to do that, is that balance is, if you start to think about it and feel it, one of the things that yoga teaches you is that balance is not just a physical accomplishment. And this is especially important for people who live with disabilities or misaligned bodies, especially, like, imagine someone with cerebral palsy, let's say, whose body's always going to be like in different alignment positions, right? That like this is something that they've got to still feel the sensation of balance in order to, even though they're physically out of balance. Now, that kind of skill, the ability to separate the sensation of balance from the performance of balance, from the ability to stand equally on 2 feet. Let's say you have a traumatic brain injury and you close your eyes and it's really hard to balance, right? Because your brain can't process all the incredible amounts of information that require to stand upright and to move from ball of foot to heel, to shift weight, like all that stuff. There are very much, yoga can start teaching you ways to enhance the sensation of balance. Because if you think about what balance is, and those of you that have been yoga teachers or are yoga teachers or practice yoga, think of like tree pose, right? Where you stand on one leg and pull the other leg up and put the sole of the foot on the inner thigh and stand upright, and then maybe take your arms over your head. That success you can't just use your will. At first, a beginner teeter-totters back and forth, but over time, in order to do that pose well, or any balancing poses, you actually have to integrate with the space around you while staying strong within your own body, right? So think about what I just said there. You have to stay strong within your own body. You can't just teeter-totter back and forth. You have to integrate from the core outward in order to stay balanced. Now, I'm telling you, the times I've worked with people that do a lot of skiing, like adaptive skiing, the core strength and the core balance is incredibly important in order for you to maximize your efficiency of going up and down the hill. So this idea that balance is more than just accomplishment, that balance grows from inside to out. And in order to balance well, your mind has to calm down. So I'm focusing on balance for the next bit of time because it's a mind-body example of a way to go and practice all these things at once. All right, so just to tell you, just to kind of know what I mean, if you're at home, everyone just stand up for a second, if you can. And I'm in a wheelchair, so I'm not standing up, but I'm getting equal on my sitting bones and putting my feet down flat on my foot pedals, right? So I want you to stand up, right? And what's interesting about balance is that in order to balance, you by definition have to go inward a little bit, right? You have to start sensing at a different level. Like it's much harder to balance like on one foot, don't do that right now, while reading a book, because your mind is one direction, or let's say it's much harder to balance when you're trying to balance and you're watching something that's about to go wrong outside of you, that your mind has to stay in your own body in order to balance, right? And so one of the things that yoga is going to help with an athlete is the development of inner awareness is going to be required for balance, right? And so that's a big thing. The other thing, instead of thinking about balance as a teeter-totter balance, like the beginning person in tree pose that's wobbling back and forth, right? Balance, think about balance as an equal distribution of presence within the body. So instead of focusing, if you're standing and trying to do tree pose, Vrikshasana, and you're only focused on your down leg, you're gonna wobble more. If you can stay present through your whole body, down through your foot, keeping your chest lifted, keeping the inside, the sole of the foot on the inside of your thigh, that full bodiness is gonna help you balance more from inside to out. So think about balance, and this is going to be true for the athletes you're working with, is that they're going to need to promote a more equal distribution of presence within their body, and breath can really help that. So I know you're still standing. I forgot that because I can't look at you, right? But so you're standing. So just already, if you're just standing there, go to the grocery store. Like go over to the one hip you always lean into when you're standing in the grocery store line, right? Where you're just kind of hanging out, and feel what that feels like. And most of you probably always are going into one hip more than the other, especially if you've had kids and you hold them on one hip more. But now I want you to like equalize that and equalize the presence on both feet, and then balance on the four corners of each foot. So check what happens when your mind has to do that. You have to start discriminating in your body. Your mind goes away from being outward as much. It goes more inward. And then this added kind of strange instruction of balancing on the four corners of your feet. Obviously, we're doing the pose Tadasana right now. If you're sitting in a wheelchair, I want you to feel each sitting bone and the bottom of each foot, right? The nature of being balanced. Now, notice what happens when I ask you to balance your head over your neck, right? So that, what? You have to go like, and go more inward. So obviously in Tadasana, mountain pose, you go down, gravity's helping you go down through the floor, but you're lifting up through the core. You're moving in multiple directions. One of the things that a yoga practice is going to help an athlete with is being able to have simultaneous sensations within the body and directions while their mind is staying calm. So this idea of going down and rising up while staying balanced on the four corners of your feet. And so now I want you to try to balance in the whole room. With what's that even mean? Well, this is a good practice. So balance on the four corners of your feet and then utilize your nervous system's ability to have that has proprioception to feel like you're more integrated with the whole room. And as you integrate with the whole room, see if you can't enhance your sense of inward balance. So obviously, I'm teaching you Tadasana from a perspective of balance that's got way more focus on inward awareness in a pose. So as you balance on the four corners of your feet, as you balance in the whole room, now integrate your breath and feel that each palm, each elbow pit, the back of each knee, these types of full-bodied awareness exercises that are more than just a body scan or visualization, these are going to be crucial for an athlete, right? That to have a sense of their whole body, whether or not they have a severed spinal cord, for example. Okay, good, and then have a seat down. So this idea that your body has this introception, if you want to get into the word, like that's awareness of what's happening within your body and how it's balanced between different parts, not just awareness of hunger and stuff, but how you are being present within your body in relationship to what's outside of you, right? This is something that yoga is going to really help with, that balance is going to need to be practiced. And if you think about balance from another perspective, if you have a narrow base, right? If you like think about a two-legged stool, right? It's going to fall over. You add the third leg, you widen your sense of base. You widen the base. The stool gets more sturdy. There's a reason why chairs have four legs, usually more than two or more than three, is because as you widen the base. But now think about, if I'm going down here and I back up a little bit, think about, and that's not going to work. You're not going to be able to see my legs, but I'm in a wheelchair. Think about if I'm only thinking about balance. Remember, I'm T4, so I don't have as much trunk control, right? If I'm only thinking about my balance as being controlled from up here, if I don't keep some level of presence in my sitting bones and in my feet, right? My sense of balance is like I'm on a two-legged stool. I'm fighting everything up here. So the more you can help the people that you're coaching, or if you're an athlete out there, the more you can help them have some sort of practice separate from their athletic performance that keeps them connected to their whole body, it's a really good idea. And for a lot of people living with disability, and for anyone in general, right, the feet, right, are one of the places that the mind tends to leave. So believe it or not, so I've got my foot up here. Love you to grab your foot, right? And I want you just to take your thumb, and of course, I'd love it if you had your shoes and socks off, but whatever, right? I have your shoes off for this, and just start to like squeeze the bottom of your feet. So like for a spinal cord injured person, listening to where your feet are as you're having tactile input on your hand, on some level, starts to retrain the brain, right? Which is really important. So I would say for just from an equal distribution of presence, I would start teaching and having the people you're helping be more aware of their feet, right? Even if they can't walk, right? This is something, because you want to get the body, the mind, to be more aware of the body so it doesn't have to grip so much to succeed. Now, these are practices that you may or may not want to integrate, and I'm taking the other foot up, that you may or may not want to integrate in the middle of whatever you're performing, right? But being able to help an athlete actually synchronize body sensation with breath, body movement with breath. These are good practices, and they're practices that don't have to be so destructive or hard physically, but you're going to have to help. You're going to have to become and or help the person you're helping become more patient, to realize that there's so many things that have to happen outside of the particular sport that they're in order, and it's not just weightlifting, it's not just strength, it's literally they need to practice more mind-body awareness, and that's part of it. All right, so more awareness of the feet, more learning that how to teach inner awareness, which would be giving instructions, like giving them instructions. Like to me, if I'm teaching someone who, like for example, has a spinal cord injury, I'm telling them to push down through their inner heels even when they can't, because I want their mind to continually try to locate where they are in space. Because I know the more they're locating their body in space, the better their balance is. And that's going to require a development of inner awareness. One of the ways to start to calm the mind down, here's another tip. Have your athletes start practicing how to soften the organs of perception, right? Where get them some time to go through, and maybe it's before they go and compete, maybe it's before they practice, but sit upright in alignment, close their eyes, soften the skin on their forehead. You just do it now. Soften the skin on your forehead, around the temples. Let your eyes drop. Let your face get, it's like Shavasana, if you know this in yoga, right? Like let it soften, but make sure you soften the jaw and the inside of the mouth, and especially the tongue. So you're starting to give, those are all the places, the organs of perception are where the brain grips outward experience. And if you can start to show an athlete that when they need to grip outwardly to succeed, they need to, but they need to have a balancing on an inward dimension. So having them practice balancing the organs of perception while lifting their chest and breathing, you're starting to train the calmer mind, which then they'll be able to maintain while their body's getting more active in their whatever their practice of their sport is. So this idea of a calm mind, active body, you need to practice each part of that. You need to practice the actions of it, but you also need to practice the tools you can use to get the mind calmer. One of them is balancing or softening organs of perception. One is making them think more about balance. Now to switch gears into even more practical, that this idea of, and this is in the yoga pose, there's some basic mind-body truths that are going to help an athlete succeed, right? And one of them is more of the awareness of the core of the body. And I don't just mean core strength, but core strength helps, right? But the idea that their core channel is the center of their movement in any movement. So little things that are so obvious on one level. I mean, everyone just, as you're sitting there, turn your head quick to the left and then to the right. But now, practicing more body awareness, put your consciousness in the center of your chest and keep this as the anchor as you turn your head. And then come on back to center. Keep this as the anchor and turn your head, right? And be in the center. Now we're going to add a dimension, right? So now I want you to put your consciousness here, but also hit your sits bones down and lift your very low abdomen up. So anchor your consciousness here, feel your sitting bones, feel where, or project your awareness down to where your inner heels are, and then anchor here still and turn your head. So all of a sudden, what seems like just a head turning exercise is actually a full bodied exercise where, so I'm anchoring here, I'm feeling my sitting bones, I'm extending from my inner groin to the inner knee and down through the inner heel, right? I'm doing all of that and I'm turning my head. So what seems like just an action suddenly is being practiced as an inward expression and inward awareness of an outer action, which is exactly what performance requires in an athletic competition, right? And so you're practicing stuff like that. you're constantly trying to get them to feel. So other ways, like helping people with their core channel strength, like you can have them put a block between their knees, right? And even I can't squeeze a block together because my legs are paralyzed, but I can put a block there and belt my legs. Anything that makes me, whether it's visual or whatever, or physical sensation, which I can kind of feel it now, but not in a normal sense, like where you get the core activation, right? The differentiating different parts of your body. Like again, I'm thinking about someone that's doing a wheelchair sport right now, but that can apply to anything, right? Being able to distinguish what it's like to hit down with their sitting bones and lift their lower abdomen up, right? So try that at home. Ground your sitting bones, lift your very, very low abdomen up, but then at the same time, notice that you can extend awareness down through your heels. This is the core channel that needs to stay focused in balance. So, and then imagine I'm teaching a chair yoga class, right? And I'm focusing on this core channel, right? Anchoring stuff in the center of the chest, but wanting to connect that to the sitting bones and to the inner heels, right? So everyone take your arms wide. Right now, here's a weird instruction that's much more inward. Keep your arms up. I'm just leaning forward to talk and project my breath, right? So your arms are wide. I want you to stretch from the inside of your elbow out through the inner wrist and feel how that changes. Instead of just holding your arms up, go inward, expand out from the inside of the elbow out through the inner wrist. And then take your arms down. Watch the sequence here of how I'm building an asana practice into a full body distribution of presence. Now on this next time, instead of stretching from the center of the elbow up to the center of the wrist, I want you to anchor it in the center of your chest, open this space out through, start from the inner chest, out through the inner elbow, inside the elbow, out through the wrists. Now add your breath into that expansion. Notice when you anchor here, the inner edge of your shoulder blades help ground you, and you're not able to just, when you try to go from the center of your elbow to the center of your wrist, you don't get to just use your will. You have to like go inward while keeping centered here, and then take your arms down. Now now we're gonna do the same thing again, but I want you to be more of your sitting bones, down, slightly to the abdomen. Inhale, take your arms wide, be more aware of your inner heel, center from the center of the chest, feel what that happens to your inner edge of your shoulder blades, ground that down to your sitting bones, down to your inner heels. Now stretch from the center of the elbow out through the center of the wrist. Take a breath. Now look what I've done. Those instructions, and then release, those instructions have actually made the practitioner, me, go much more inward with part of my dimension, which I know is crucial for balance and makes my mind be able to be more inward as actions are happening outward, which calm mind, active body is part of what helps performance, right? And so all these things, and we're trying to more equally distribute presence, instead of just holding up your arms from the top of your shoulders, right? We're trying to grow awareness from inside to out. Another really interesting, very simple thing you can do for people is have them do asana or yoga poses or whatever kind of mind-body practice you teach, and have them practice joint awareness, because your brain is more innervated into your joints, right? There's more sensors there. So if you want to stand up quick, do this if you can, but take your arms, like your legs 3.5, 4 feet wide, take your arms wide. Feel you can now go inward. This is an inward instruction. Remember, we're trying to develop inner awareness. Put light, like the game Light Bright, in your ankles and your knees, your hips, your shoulders, your elbows, and your wrists. Look how you're forced to go inward. Remember, your head's a joint and go in every direction, equal distribution of presence. Now add your breath. And you're developing a practice from inside out that's not physically violent on the body, which is exactly what you want your athletes to be able to do in their repetitive movements. You want them to learn how enough form and inward dimension so their outer actions don't wear out their physical body as fast. One of my final suggestions, and this is in a chair class, I'm just trying to focus on one thing, is to change gravity, right? But practice the principles that I'm talking about, which is a more equal distribution of presence. So we're gonna just do it quick because we're running out of time, right? So you're sitting, you're feeling your sitting bones, you're centering yourself, right? Now I want you to like come off to the side, lean over to one side. So I'm always choosing balance, so I'm using my other hand to grab my wheelchair here, taking the other hand up. But as I expand this way, I make sure that I keep I'm expanding to the left, I'm pressing down through my right hip, I'm extending the underside of my arm, and I'm open. Now here's me with a closed chest, here's me with an open chest. As my chest opens, I'm grounding through my legs, even though I can't physically do it. And I'm breathing, right? Yeah, if you have students with, that have full trunk balance, they can do both arms. I'm gonna go the other way, right? Here's me with the drop chest. That's not me being as unbalanced. Here's me opening my chest, hitting through my back, now my left sitting bone, down to my left heel, extending out, but keep not just reaching this way, but grounding my shoulder blade back into the socket as I extend. This is a really good time to breathe because now I'm grounded and expanding. I'm practicing balance, an equal distribution of presence, a greater awareness when I go off to the side and change balance here, right? When I go off to the side, by grounding to the opposite hip and the opposite foot, I'm actually trying to keep my presence more equally distributed. Another very simple mind-body practice is you want your athletes to practice symmetry if they're working on balance, right? So like I'm leaning forward right now and my forearms are going on my knees and I'm being very conscious of the sensation and the balance, and you guys should do it at home, right? How the forearms are hitting your femur bones, making sure it's equal, right? I'm actually putting my palms together. I'm lifting my chest. As I hit my sitting bones down, I'm lifting through my chest and I'm pressing down through my feet and I'm taking a breath. Now, those of you that actually know upward facing dog, the yoga pose, you're almost in that position or cobra pose right here and breathing, but I'm doing it from being equally weight on each forearm, noticing my breath into each nostril, noticing my breath into each lung, grounding my hands, and having my whole body to include my legs in an action because I know that an equal distribution of presence is going to help me balance more. So again, practicing being out of balance, but maintaining an inward dimension to being out of balance. Practicing more core awareness as the anchor from which expansion happens. All these things are skills in a yoga pose, right? But they're also skills, to use my example, because I was a basketball player more, right? I need, as I throw the basketball this way, I need to stay grounded in my sitting bones and in my feet, whether or not I'm paralyzed. If I want my form to track and get repetitive, because if I'm off balance when I shoot, my ability to get the same sensation over and over again is going to be less because I'm off balance. Help people find their core. Help people find strength near the center. Promote equal distribution of presence while they're breathing. These are the ways that you can help athletic performance and help a calm mind happen during an active body. All right, it's 10:02. I'm supposed to leave time for questions. I know I went kind of fast because I get excited, especially when I can't see your eyes and I'm just talking to myself. So I'm hoping that.
Yeah, we do. We have several questions.
Okay.
The first one is, what is a strategy for getting competitively driven athletes to embrace the sentiment or pursuing their relief, recovery, balance with the same enthusiasm? How did you come to realize its significance?
So quick answer. I'm going to try to give it quick. What I do if I know I've got, like, so I'm giving an example. I was just at the Move United Ski Spectacular teaching some Paralympic skiers, right? What I did was I appealed to the intensity of their athlete in them, right? And said, you've got to pursue the sensation of relief with the same vigor that you have to pursue lifting weights or training cardiovascularly. Why? Because your overall success, you're not ever going to be successful as an athlete if you're injured and if you're worn down. So rather than trying to go, oh, embrace meditation, the other thing is get your athletes to exhale more. That's going to help because that's the parasympathetic nervous system. That's an aside. But rather than trying to get them to do something that they're not comfortable with, invoke the will, their warrior, their actual athletic drive to take seriously what else they need to do. I don't think this is unlike strategies that have developed to try to get an athlete to be more aware of his or her diet. Because you can't actually, part of the idea is, I want to say, their inward quiet dimension is as important to performance as their diet and eating broccoli. So I try to use their strengths and not take it away from them to practice more inward dimension, but try to get it to be in the river of their achievement, if that makes sense.
Next question. Do you prefer to do yoga in your chair or on a mat? Are there pros and cons to either option?
Yes, there are pros and cons to either action. Very much out of my wheelchair. I want to have a more expansive feeling. It's harder to, when you're in your chair, there's more spinal compression. That's part of why they say sitting is the new smoking, which is not good news if you get around in a wheelchair. So the idea of spaciousness and openness is better achieved out of the wheelchair. Also, being able to move your body, like taking your arms and legs wide or your legs wide. I remember the first time I worked with my yoga teacher, she got me out of the wheelchair, which is a big thing. And then she had to take my legs wide. It's called Upavista Konasana, if you know the yoga pose. And I remember I was 25. I had been injured when I was 13. I realized I hadn't had my legs wide in 12 years. And the fact is, not just if you're an athlete, it's your birthright to live in your whole body, right? And so getting out of the chair is good. There are a lot of things that can be done in the wheelchair, especially if getting out of your wheelchair isn't as easy to do. You can do yoga in bed, especially if your bed isn't super soft, right? You can, but the getting out of your chair is really important if you need to learn how to integrate the sensation of relief and support into action. But I'm telling you, you can do a lot in your chair. Like since the virus that shall not be named has got a lot of us at home, we're teaching all of our classes at Mind Body Solutions online, and we're keeping them all in a chair. And there's a lot of things you can do, and they're very powerful, and there's something lost too. So ideally, you have a practice that includes both in your chair and out of your chair.
All right. Is there a trick I can use to do the sitting version of the downward dog when I'm a left side amputee?
Absolutely, damn it. And the answer to that is yes. The answer to that is it would be really helpful if you ever came to one of our adaptive yoga classes or signed up at Mind Body Solutions Private, because to not be able to see you and answer that question is very difficult. A left side amputee, to do downward facing dog, you're gonna have to still practice awareness on the opposite side. I mean, I'm imagining you still have your shoulder. Again, I don't know, right? And you're gonna have to get as equally balanced in your body. And like here's me, right? I'm only having one arm, or I'm trying to imagine and feel what you have to go through, right? But I can do a whole bunch of things that make sure I don't just reach with one arm. You might not be able to take as much weight. You might not be able to do a traditional downward facing dog. You might have to figure out ways to put your arm up on a wall but then ground each sitting bone as you extend the one arm out and with the one arm up, but then extend the other shoulder, right? Or this part from here to here out as you hit down and rise up, right? So there's all these things. I'd have to see I'd have to see you to actually give you really direct tips on it, but some version of it is definitely possible. And that's why Mind Body Solutions teaches adaptive students, but also yoga teachers how to teach. What I'd love to do is help train your yoga teacher to help you do some of this too.
All right, I think we have time for one more. What do you say to athletes who say they cannot feel their feet?
Yeah, well, the answer is, okay, lots of answers to this. On one level, what they're reporting is absolutely correct, especially like a severed spinal cord. On one level, they're exactly being the product of the paradigm of mind-body interaction that comes more from a Western perspective, which is a very powerful perspective. But there are other levels of sensation than what I can feel when I have full neurological benefit. I have never been with a student who has a spinal cord injury who initially reports to me that they have no sensation below their point of injury. Within 15 or 20 minutes, I've never had someone say, oh, they say like, oh my God, I can feel that. I've never had them say, I don't feel anything. What's happening is that your mind is used to having a certain type of sensation that is the function or the product of a fully healthy spinal cord, for example. But there are other levels of more subtle perception that are there, and the mind, the brain, can get attuned to different delivery systems of input. For example, maybe you're a spinal cord injured person or you know someone, and they have their arms wide. If someone comes up and pushes into each knee forward and puts the femur bone back into their hip socket, their arms will get the sensation of being lighter. And they'll feel how much heavier they feel in their whole body when the person doesn't push on their knees, right? So this level of sensation, although it's not going to make them walk again, it definitely allows the brain enough input to start to locate the whole body in space. And when that starts to happen, balance increases. So again, it's one of those things where then another more yogic answer is that prana is flowing through the whole body, whether or not the brain can sense it. And there are ways that you can, through a yoga practice, can train your brain, and it's a miraculous organ, to sense things that aren't as direct. And ultimately, pranayama helps you feel, yogic breathing can help you feel more of your body, even or whether or not you have neurological return. Now, that type of a sensation, though, isn't necessarily going to make you walk again, but it's going to make you feel more whole. So the answer is, because I know it and I've taught so many people, they can feel stuff. It just may not be able to be the type of sensation that they were hoping for or what they had before they were injured.
Thanks. And I think Julianne's going to come back with a couple.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Matthew. It was such a treat to have you today and to help share some tips for athletic performance, and really enjoyed seeing the answers to this question too. So thank you so much for joining us.
It's an honor. You guys do great work. Move United's trying to do good stuff.
I'm going to turn things back to my slides here to go through a couple of closing remarks with you all. Please take a few moments to complete a survey about today's webinar. Let us know what you thought we did really well, or maybe something else you'd like to see in the future. That survey link will pop up when you close out of GoToWebinar today. Also, we would really love to have your love on social media. especially if something resonated with you on today's webinar from Matthew. This is a great way to help get the message out about yoga being inclusive for everyone and how helpful it is for your mental and physical well-being. And you can participate in Move United's Adapt at Home initiative and show us how you're adapting at home. And if you visit our website, moveunitedsport.org/adapt-at-home, you can find a list of virtual yoga classes, Zumba, all types of fitness, seated and ambulatory. So make sure to check out some classes this week. And we look forward to seeing you on next week's webinar, which is going to round out our series on yoga and disability. We will be having a panel discussion, including a couple of Paralympic athletes who you will hear firsthand about their experience with yoga and in sport and how it's been so helpful for their success. So make sure that you tune in next week, Tuesday, June 30th at 2 o'clock Eastern for that session. Thank you again, and we will see you next week.